It's the Underdogs back with you. Another exciting day and an exciting time in sports. I'm Jordan Brenner, joined by my co-host, Peter Keating. Peter, hello.
How's it going, Jordan? Things are good. I don't know if you saw this. We're recording on Wednesday. Byron Buxton, 2 home runs last night, Jordan. It's all coming true.
Do you have a fat head of him on your wall? What?
I
How is there a shrine to
I
Byron?
don't. It's just he's a great guy. He's a great, phenomenal athlete, and he's missed, I don't know, 8 out of every 10 games he could play for years now, and it's not really his fault. So I just really root hard for him, and I recommend him all the time. And so I let you know when he's doing well, Jordan.
Well, a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about the fast-paced, fast-pitch sport you should be following this spring when Jayna Bardahl of The Athletic joins us to talk about college softball. The World Series is coming up, and it's something you should be watching and maybe even betting on. But first, Peter.
Well, Jordan, I just want to say we always like sneaky underdogs. Now we're taking the full step to being underhanded.
Oh my God. On that note, speaking of underhanded, now we're down to the Final Four in the two main winter sports now as we steam toward the end of May. Hockey, NBA, 4 teams, conference finals in each. Peter, let's start with the NHL because our New York Rangers are still alive. And who are they taking on but the mighty Florida Panthers from the city of Miami, home to the Dan Le Batard Show? And Peter, this network might be called Le Batard and Friends, but we are not friends right now.
Jordan, let me read you a headline from Fortune magazine last July. Are you ready? This is the headline. Miami's Mount Trashmore, that's in quotes, comma, overflowing septic tanks pose a $4 billion challenge to its efforts to woo America's financial elite. Jordan, you and I have talked about how hard it is to predict hockey. Florida right now is the lowest odds to win the Stanley Cup on DraftKings, plus 225. Dallas is at plus 260. Edmonton's at plus 280. And the New York Rangers, winners of the President's Cup, with more overtime wins than any of those other teams, are at plus 400. That's ridiculous. It's not totally ridiculous. It's just a little ridiculous because the gap between among those teams is pretty tight, as it should be. There's no way Florida should be at the top, the Rangers at the bottom. It's like what you said about clear Gatorade. Remember, we're talking about how do you bet what color Gatorade is going to get thrown on the winning coach of the Super Bowl? And your point was, who the hell knows? But if you come across a market where nobody knows, yet there are differences in odds, bet the underdog, because if everyone has the same chance of winning, the underdog bet has the most value. So clearly the Rangers have the most value right now to win the Cup in a bet, and the Panthers have the worst. But here's what I really want to say. If you Google, and Jordan, we go on about Panthers players we like or how good their goalie is and whatnot, and well, it's okay. They won last year's Cup on a fluke, but that's okay. If you Google best Panthers player, do you know what you get? You get 28 guys who played for the Carolina Panthers before you get a single hockey player. Okay. These guys were 27th in attendance last year on their way to winning the Stanley Cup. What is hockey doing in Southern Florida, Jordan? Did you hear the joke about the priest, the rabbi, and the exotic dancer who went to a Panthers game, Florida Panthers game? Oh, I'm sorry, Jordan. There's no punchline. It's just real big news every time 3 people show up to see hockey in South Florida. Jordan, this is ridiculous. Miami is the least underdog city in America. Now, I'm not talking about the city's neighborhoods, the broadly speaking, their amazing fan base. I'm not talking about the bygone days where Muhammad Ali trained in the Fifth Street gym, right? And so did Sugar Ray Leonard. Miami, in the biggest possible sense, is a place where immigrants come from all over the world, especially Latin America. Cultures collide, the languages, the politics, the music, the food are amazing. But that's not the Miami sports fan base, Jordan. You know this. The Miami sports fan base is built on the hedge fund guys who, like Ken Griffin, whose Citadel headquarters would be more than 1,050 feet tall on the bayfront in Miami, except federal aviation regulations don't let you build that tall. So these guys, these trillionaires, used to be drug money, now it's hedge fund money, are just pushing further and further out into the ocean and further up into the sky, and they're isolating themselves from everything that matters to regular people. That's who the Miami luxury base is. That's what you're taking your talents to. That's who's paying for that. And I have to say, it's kind of gross. This is a city that sits on limestone. It's sinking. It's 40 feet above sea level. It's the most prone city to America to tropical storms. And its sports teams are named the Heat and the Hurricanes. Why don't we just name like the San Francisco Giants the Earthquakes, or put a team in London and call it the Blitz? It's a city. It's the Magic City, right? Miami's the Magic City. The city of magical thinking is what it is, Jordan. Please, this Florida Panthers team has grit. They have some snarl to them. They have some skill to them. They've shown they can beat really good teams. They should immediately move to Hartford or Quebec or some city that appreciates hockey. That's what I think. And they're not underdogs. So there you go, Jordan. Take the Rangers and just, don't be part of the people packing their bags and moving to celebrate Thanksgiving in 150-story condos, on the beach without actually ever getting any sun. That's all I got to say about Miami.
That's all you got to say? Because I'm pretty sure I just read War and Peace during all you had to say.
Mount Trashmore.
That's texting.
That's what regular people have to deal with in Miami.
I'm texting with our producer, Sarah, during that epic Macbethian soliloquy. She's saying, okay, talk, please. Say something. Peter, I don't even know how to follow that other than, hey, Le Batard, hey, Stugotz, hey, Mike Ryan, hey, Jessica Smetana, we're coming for you. Rangers in 5. Let's go. Peter, you have any thoughts on the other before we switch to the NBA? You have any thoughts on the actual hockey between the Oilers and the Stars, and which of those teams is going to be facing the Rangers in the Stanley Cup Finals? And try to keep it for under 17 minutes.
I think that Dallas has the better goalie. Mm-hmm. And I think if they manage to keep scoring down and he has a good series, that could be the difference. But they're both, you can't argue with Edmonton's scoring. You can't argue with Dallas's depth. They're both really well-constructed rosters. And one of them had 47 wins this season. One of them had 48. So one's plus 260, one's plus 280. They're very evenly matched, but Ottinger's pretty good.
All right, so let's pivot to the NBA now, because I have stuff I want to say, and I'm going to shut you out because, you've spoken enough. But unlike hockey, where you said all 4 teams have odds between plus 215 and plus 400, there's a clear favorite. The Celtics are minus 170. There's a somewhat favorite in the West. The Timberwolves are plus 280 to win the championship. The Mavs plus 500. The Pacers plus 3,500. Now, if we've been doing the show yesterday, before game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, what I would have said is I like the Pacers to possibly win game 1 and very likely win one of the first 2 games. Well, why? The Celtics tend to mess around. I think I've always wanted to study this. I think when a team comes off a long series, sometimes they start very well in game 1. We saw that for the Pacers last night. They pissed the game away down the stretch. There's no 2 ways about it, and we don't know what kind of effect they're going to have there. But the Celtics without Porzingis are a little more vulnerable than people are noticing. I don't know if the Pacers have the resolve to bounce back from completely blowing a game like that, but this series is not over. Let's start there.
The Pacers obviously have look at the last series. Pacers have the resolve to bounce back from basically anything. However, I don't think the effect of what it's going to do to them in game 2 is what's important. What's really important is they had game 1, but they didn't win it. So, it's like, okay, people talk about momentum or the bounce back or whatever. They lost game 1. This is their best shot. They had a chance to win. They didn't. And that in itself is just difficult. I mean,
right. So look, the question is, does Porzingis come back in time for the Celtics to win a championship? Because if it doesn't crop up against the Pacers, it's definitely going to crop up in the NBA Finals. And both those teams present real challenges. Now, breaking down whether it's the Timberwolves or the Mavericks who gets there is fascinating. The Mavs are the underdog. I'm not sure that's fair. I mean, Luka Doncic, as much as we love Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic is the best player in the series. As much as I can't stand listening to Kyrie Irving talk about anything anymore, he's still a transcendent star. And the Mavs did something that you love. And we talked about last year that it doesn't happen that often in the NBA. What happened last year, and it happened again this year, they rebuilt their team on the fly during the season, adding Daniel Gafford to be a second rim protector to pair with Derek Lively. So they always have one of those guys on the floor. And then PJ Washington was such a fantastic fit as a stretch 4 who can give them some size, but also perimeter shooting. And gosh, doesn't that match up nicely with a Timberwolves team that plays Karl Anthony Towns at the 4?
Matchups, great matches up, great. And you mentioned Lively. I wanted to just point out the series between Dallas and Oklahoma City in terms of scoring was dead even. The team scored an equal number of points in those 6 games. Lively was plus 71. It may be that he's so intense. He's better playing 20 to 25 minutes a game, where he's been extraordinarily effective. And that tandem they have going at center has been great. I thought the PJ Washington move was brilliant. I didn't know it was going to work out this well. And Jordan, it's crazy. Of all the people you could have teamed Kyrie with in order to just calm him down, kind of have everybody be in a good and emotional and spiritual state, I wouldn't have picked Luka. But it turns out they pair up well in every way, and the rest of the team is perfectly built to complement them. It's a wonderfully constructed team. They're great when they play, and Luka at his best is just amazing to watch. Timber will still lead all teams in the NBA, both in offensive and defensive rating through the playoffs, and in the West anyway. I mean, I think they are the better team though, Jordan.
It's hard for me to say. The question is, first of all, I'm assuming Jaden McDaniels is going to draw the Luka assignment, although Anthony Edwards talking about how he's got Kyrie.
Yeah, and it's got to talk about how we got Kyrie. Yeah.
Right. So I think 2 areas to watch. One, bench scoring. I think the Mavs have a little more punch off the bench. If, they can go to Tim Hardaway in a pinch. They've got Green. They've got Hardy. There's guys who can, on a given night, contribute there. And number 2, just how does Mike Conley hold up here? Okay. Hurt, came back, clearly is a incredibly valuable player to what Minnesota does, even, in the twilight of his career. Minnesota's defense, we know, do they have enough scoring punch outside of Naz Reid? Very shallow bench. I'm curious, can you keep playing Mike Conley 40 minutes a night? I think that's what it's going to come down to.
I think Towns is just playing better in the presence of Edwards. People say great players make their teammates better. Usually what that means is a wide receiver gets a lot more passes from a good quarterback, so he scores more. That's not really getting better. These guys actually are better because of Edwards. And don't underestimate Kyle Anderson or Naz Reid. I mean, the guys who have been filling in, but doing more than filling in, have been super productive for Minnesota just all season long.
I hear you, but if I'm faced with the Wolves at minus 170 to win the conference or the Mavs at plus 145, I think I'm leaning toward those odds with the Mavs. But we shall see, and we are even more excited to see what the college softball landscape has in store for us. We'll be back with Jayna Bardahl from The Athletic right after this. We're back, and we are joined by Jayna Bardahl. She's a college sports writer and editor for The Athletic, so that makes her a colleague of Peter and mine. And we're super excited to be able to talk to her about the women's softball World Series, which is already, we're at the super regional stage. And if you're not into it, it's on ESPN all the time. So dive in now. Jayna, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to talk some college softball today.
So Jayna, before we get into picks and predictions and what's going to happen the rest of the way, you wrote a piece recently outlining the rise of popularity. If you're not paying attention, I don't know where you are, because college softball is everywhere now. Jayna, talk to us about what's changed and how it's sort of having a moment, maybe in a similar way to what we saw with women's basketball this winter.
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I worked with my colleague Stuart Mandel, and we worked together talking to a ton of people in the college softball space, current players and coaches, former players, former coaches, and legends like Mike Candria at Arizona, Sue Enquist at UCLA, just about what is next for the sport. I think we've seen the exposure of college softball has really grown in recent years. The World Series viewership is up, attendance is up. There's new stadiums around the country, Northwestern, Stanford. Last month, I took a trip to Oklahoma and saw their new stadium. It's Love's Field, and the atmosphere was just unmatched. Obviously, Oklahoma is a really successful program right now, going for their 4th consecutive national title. And you can really tell the fan base there is just completely rallied behind that softball team. So the popularity is there. The sport itself is super fun to watch. It's super fast paced. I think a lot of times it gets compared, right away to college baseball, but I think they're really two different sports. I mean, softball is has a ton of offense throughout the entire game. It's very fast paced. It's these pitchers are just icons on their team because of the way the game is. They can pitch a whole game, and they can pitch multiple times in a series. So you're really seeing some of these stars that are emerging. They're playing every game, and you can go to watch them. So that's how we came up with this story. And we were just looking at, so we have all these different pieces. We have the TV exposure, we have the attendance, we have the excitement in a game. And with women's basketball, maybe they needed a Caitlin Clark, a star that everybody was able to support and rally behind and was excited to watch. And some people we were talking to thought Stanford's pitcher, Nyjah Kennedy, could be the Caitlin Clark. That was an exact quote from Monica Abbott, a former pitcher at Tennessee. So that kind of inspired the story. And we're like, are the stars the last piece of the puzzle that we need? And I think this postseason has been really exciting, and I think we've seen stars like Nyjah. I mean, she bailed Stanford out of the regionals from an elimination game, so she's stepping up to the plate just how everybody thought. So it's a really fun sport to watch, and it was cool to talk to some of these stars just about how much the sport has changed from 50 years ago even to 4 years ago. It's grown so much.
So that brings up everything you're talking about is really interesting. It brings up two things that we would like to talk about because we're the Underdogs podcast. So first of all, when you discover something new and you don't know about it before, and it's not as famous as some of those stuff, college softball is fascinating because it's so much fun. Jordan, it's like, imagine if like Major League Baseball pitchers' average ERA was 6 or 7, but that was okay. And pitchers pitched complete games. The best athletes were pitchers who were striking guys out and, and showing their dominance, but teams still score a lot of runs per game. It's just a fun product. But the other thing that's really interesting here is that there's this investment cycle that flip from going down, can sometimes flip from going down to going up. Like if you get enough investment, then you get enough attendance, you get enough revenues. That leads to more investment, which, and it starts to build on itself. And it seems like, is it right to say, Jayna, that's what's happening here? Like we've noticed for a while that revenues are up. ESPN has held the rights to softball for like 40 something years, but recently they decided to flood the zone. And that seems to have made some difference in terms of sparking interest, getting sponsorship, like you said, getting new stadiums, which develops athletes, which leads to more investment. It seems like this is an upward spiral. Finally, is that because fundamentally they decided to put so many more games on TV?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like originally I went into this story reporting, okay, I've seen on social media, viewership of the Women's College World Series is up. What's behind that? And I think what I learned was, yes, viewership numbers are up, but they're also showing more games. So that's not to say it's more people aren't watching. More people are watching because they can watch more games, and especially watching more regular season games. I think from reporting my story, that was what I learned was the World Series honestly has always had a lot of interest, but now people are able to watch regular season games. So they're not just like, oh, there's a World Series game on, let me turn it on. I've never watched college softball. I don't know any of these names. I don't know any of these teams. Now the games have been on throughout the regular season, so you're recognizing the teams that are really good and the names, the players that are really good. So by the time you get to this World Series, even the casual fan can be somewhat familiar with who's in the mix and what players are the stars to watch out for at the World Series. So like you said, I think viewership is a huge part, but that comes with just more games being televised and exposed to people that want to watch it.
Well, to follow on that, did you talk to anyone from ESPN? If not, do you have a sense of what led to the impetus to televise more games?
Yeah, we did. I did talk to a few people at ESPN, their vice president for programming of Olympic sports. And, I had asked if the women's college basketball uptick was how much they were looking at that in college softball. It was more so that's something I think they wanted to look at after the postseason, because I think that's when women's college basketball also saw that just the huge uptick. So I think after this postseason, it's going to be a big reflection period for where this goes moving forward.
But something triggered them to put more regular season games on. They clearly see some sort of growth potential here, right? They're not just, we worked at ESPN. They're not just shooting in the dark here. Like there's something telling them there's potential here.
Well, Jordan, it might have been the pandemic, because this had its roots in decisions they made 4 or 5 years ago when they were actually all of a sudden right around the year 20 and 21 looking and hungry for interesting new content, right? I mean, that's when it took a big leap up, I think.
So let's get right into the tournament now, okay? Oklahoma, prohibitive favorite. I think they're minus 150 to win the title. Texas,
yeah, but they win all the time. Come on, we need to look at some other teams here.
Texas, I think, is about plus 600. They're number 2, plus 650, and then you jump all the way to Oklahoma State at plus 1900. So let's play a game. Outside of Oklahoma, outside of Texas, who's your best bet to win this whole thing?
I'm saying Tennessee. I think their pitching has been elite all season. I'm honestly surprised they're not higher on that list. They allowed 0 runs in the regional round. Nobody scored against them. Carlin Pickens is elite, and their entire pitching staff is really, they can rely on it. So I'm saying Tennessee. So
they're plus 1900. And anybody else who you like as a long shot, maybe to not win it, but to get to the Final Four, get to the final stage of the World Series? You know, who else catches your eye right now? Who's under the radar?
Maybe UCLA. I think they have they have really solid players. Maya Brady is a 2-time Pac-12 Player of the Year. Obviously, last year UCLA got dumped pretty early in the postseason. I think from regionals. I think after the first weekend, it could have been supers though. So I think they had that. Maybe they have that chip on their shoulder because they were pretty highly ranked last year and had that early exit. So they did well in regionals. Maybe they'll want to continue the trend.
Well, you mentioned Maya Brady. Do you want to tell people who that is? And does she maybe have any winning blood in her DNA?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, she does. She's Tom Brady's niece. So I spoke with her too about the story I was talking about earlier, just stars in the sport. And I asked her, how do you deal with stardom? And she said, she's had role models in her life. Not only Tom, her mom was a college softball player as well. Sports are in her blood. So I mean, she's fun to follow.
Well, let me ask you about the future for these players. Jordan has often brought up the point that women's college basketball may be more fun for fans to follow because the players are staying around longer and the teams stay together longer. I'm not sure the money's flowing yet to fast pitch pro softball. The players you're mentioning and some of these big stars, you're going to get to see them for 2, 3, 4 years, longer than we would like in college basketball or college football.
Yeah, for sure. That's a huge part of it. Even this is my second year covering the World Series, and just looking at this postseason, I've been surprised almost how many names I recognized that were pillars of the teams that won last year and that were in the finals last year. So many big names. They stayed throughout their entire eligibility. They're pillars of where they're at. There's a ton. There's Jordy Ball, who won, two championships for Oklahoma as their ace, is at Nebraska now. She was out this past year, but she's a huge name and has multiple years of eligibility left at Nebraska, where she's going to play. And she's already won 2 national championships and been was really the ace of that Oklahoma team. So there's so many players that stay through, and that helps their stardom because people recognize them more. And I think it adds to the competitiveness too, because these players know each other, they've seen each other, and it kind of, even though, Oklahoma has won 3 straight championships, but I do think the parity in the sport is increasing, even if that sounds a little contradictory.
Well, Jayna, there's no parity in the 10U Little League that I coach, where my Mighty Tufts Jumbos are undefeated, but I will be gathering the girls to watch the College World Series. And now I will sound smarter when I'm talking about these players and teams. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited for Super Regionals. And yeah, we'll keep up with the college softball coverage as well throughout the World Series.
Absolutely. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you.